Get to the church blind! Get to the church blind! Go! Now!
I'm Pete Mitchell, and he's Peyton Jones, and you're listening to Hardcore Church Planning, the companion podcast for the Church Planner Podcast and Church Planner Magazine. Each week, we'll bring you interviews from planners who are in the trenches making it happen right now. These active church planners bear it all, share their successes, their failures, and what they'd wish they'd known when they were first starting out. Listen in to discover how God is working in their church plant.
You know, when I have a large project at home, sometimes it makes sense to do it by myself. At other times, I actually save money in the long term and have a much better solution if I use an expert. It's really not that much different with church planning. Church planners who focus on building their core team and actually planting the church and partner with portability experts like Portable Church Industries hit the ground running. Yes, you may have to raise more funds up front, but let me tell you something. If I could go back in a time machine and do one thing different in all the churches that I planted, I would go back and have invested that money in Portable Church and all of the super cool kit that they give you to make the volunteers and their lives much, much easier. Trust me, your volunteers will feel invested in, and they're going to give you more of what they got. And that time where people are setting up is going to be a time where it sets the atmosphere for you to thrive. If you're thinking about launching in the next 6 to 36 months, we encourage you to check them out at portablechurch.com.
Hey, church planner, welcome to Hardcore Church Planning. This is Peyton Jones, and you are, I want to make something up. Like, I don't have a tagline like that. You know, I can't say you're in the spin zone. You're in the bandsaw zone because there's a bandsaw going in the background. And those of you that listen to these podcasts know that it's just kind of what it is. We don't really edit around here. Can't edit yourself in life, and you probably can't edit your podcast and really ever get one done because life happens. I live next to a train track. But I am here today joined by my good friend, my partner in the work, and the director of New Breed Church Planting, Matt Fretwell, multiple author, podcast host of The Wretched and the Wrecked, and like I said, his most important role is director of New Breed Church Planting. And I might want to add that he has recently been dubbed Dr. Fretwell. Did his PhD in church planning. That's pretty rock and roll. So welcome to the show after all that. Oh, my highest achieving friend gets up at 3 a.m., goes to the gym. So you know everything that you're about to hear from this guy is absolutely nuts. He's a nut. He's an animal. And luckily the Lord has grabbed him and harnessed it for the gospel. So Matt, welcome on, man.
Oh, thank you, Peyton. It's always great to talk with you, and especially to be with your guests, man. I'm a long-time listener, right? I feel like when you listen to ESPN, they're like, long-time listener, Dan Patrick, you know, and then they give their weight, you know. But yeah, man, I just you and I are just really good friends, and I love being on here.
We are, man. It's always good, and so it's kind of funny because you know we're friends, and then also too. You direct New Breed, and of course that was founded in Europe, and it was my baby, and you came in and were like, "Hey man, I think I can run this thing," and I was like, "Hey man, I suck at running this thing," and I'll never forget you telling me, "Hey, I'll run this, but you kind of got to get out of my way," and that was like music to my ears. I was like, "Okay, we got the right guy here. That's what I needed to hear." You know, a guy that comes in and says, I can do this, you know? So, hey, Matt, tell us a little bit. First question we always like to ask is how you came to faith.
Well, I would say it was definitely a long journey for me. I explained to some people that I accepted Jesus at 11, but I surrendered at about age 30. And so the difference was I got to a point in my life where I was on and off. And I was the inevitable Jonah. I knew when I was 8, I was called into the ministry. I remember telling my father, I can remember as clear as day, telling him I'm called into the ministry. And he put down his paper and said, son, there's no money in that. And it wasn't that he was discouraging me. He was just making an observation. And he was a business guy. And so I after things sort of, I'll say, just got tough in the faith, I didn't have a strong upbringing of discipleship. I just didn't have it. My family, we grew up Episcopalian, I was raised Episcopalian, and so there wasn't much of a discipleship in the aspect of growing in your faith. It was more about you attended church and you did it sort of nominally, and then you just loved God because you were supposed to. But I never really got into the aspect of surrendering to Him until years later. And when the Lord finally grabbed my heart, I was a business owner. I was a restaurant owner, but I was utilizing the same gifts. It's interesting you talk about the business aspect of New Breed, because when I was a business owner, as a restaurant owner, before I became the owner, I was an executive chef at another place. And I remember telling the owner there, I said, you have to trust me. If you trust me, this restaurant will get, and I said X amount of money in 3 years. And he thought it was an astronomical amount of money. And we hit that. We hit over that in the third year. And so, the Lord has been just gracious with me. And when He wrecked my heart, as sort of the aspect of our podcast, The Wretched and the Wrecked, but when He wrecked my heart, that was it. I realized that I had to serve Him because He was so good, because of His grace. As Luther said, if you've been taken out of the hangman's noose, you understand grace a whole lot more. And that was me. I had a lot of dark years. There are a lot of things that I'm not proud of, but you know what? I can't believe where God has taken me. So the one true thing that I'm very serious about is the gospel. And within that, I just have a zeal and passion to see people and the lostness of people come to Christ.
That's rad, man. Well, how did you get involved in church planning? What was your foray into this world? Because going from a restaurateur, an entrepreneurial guy who comes in and either starts restaurants or troubleshoots them, that's pretty cool, man. That's you can see that aspect of kind of like church planning, but at what stage did you actually get involved into church planning?
Well, it was sort of a progression. So I started, once the Lord grabbed my heart, I still had the restaurant, kind of had to get rid of it, but everything went south anyway in the market. And it was around that time that I had already started exploring and was in the aspect of doing an undergrad work, going through the motions of what does ministry look like. And I was in the Methodist church, and I entered into a year of candidacy to be licensed in the Methodist church. During that time, I got to the end. I really examined what it was like. And then I realized this may not be a perfect fit for me. And so I was about 2 days shy to go in front of the bishop, and I realized I had some theological differences, and not that any are right or wrong, it's just what fits you. And then I realized, all right, this isn't going to be a good fit. And I remember just being torn because I was feeling that God was moving me in a different direction. Well, I joined up with an A29 church plant on the Outer Banks, and I sat under a great guy. He's pretty well known, Winfield Bevins, he's now the dean of church planting at Asbury Seminary. Yeah. But anyway, from there, I kept feeling the call to plant. And just working through it. And my wife and I had people in our home, and we just started having, one guy came over with a guitar, and we would just go through the Bible, and we would sing songs. Next thing you know, we had 20 people in the house. And so I said to my wife, I think maybe this is where God is calling us. And neither one of us were that excited about it because there's no money in it, and there's no way to really gain an income. And at that time, I started seminary. So it was the aspect of, I was terrified. I was fearful of what to do, but, I just couldn't refuse God. I got on my knees with my wife, and we prayed, and through tears, we surrendered, and we said, Lord, we'll do whatever you want to do. And the rest is history, so to speak.
That's super cool, man. So so this is weird, right? Because I founded New Breed years ago, right? I think it was back in 2008 in Europe. And so it has a very kind of not necessarily what's happening now, but what's coming aspect to it. But I never talk about New Breed. I think a lot of people that hear me on the podcast or have read my books, they're reading New Breed. They're hearing New Breed. They're hearing all the things that the Lord taught me in a group of people in Europe. And then we brought that to America. But I never really talk about New Breed, the New Breed Network. You're the guy we should be hearing from. What is the New Breed Network?
Yeah, we've really worked hard in developing this and making sure that we solidified our vision and mission. So the New Breed Network is an interdenominational church planning training network of committed disciple makers. So I would say New Breed focuses on training church planners in missional engagement to reach the lostness within subcultures and hard to reach places. So many of the church planners are drawn to New Breed for our sense of brotherhood, our praxis and style of learning and training and support that we give. And so while there's a mutual camaraderie among New Breeders, we're definitely a unique crew. Like we pray for one another, we work with one another. New Breeders, our first thing is we're never alone. So in a roundabout way of kind of answering your question, New Breed Network, I would say, is a collective of training for church planners to engage in obedient Great Commission disciple making.
I love it. That's a great answer. You know, it's funny, just as you were talking, I was remembering that the name of my manuscript for Church Zero was actually The New Breed of Church. And both my wife and the publisher were like, well, that sounds kind of arrogant. So I said, what if we changed it to A New Breed of Church? And they went, no, then it loses its power. But anyways, how is New Breed distinct from, each network has its flavor, right? Like, 829 is like the Reform Network. And, Multiply, the Sin Network is the Southern Baptist Network. Each network kind of has its thing, what it's known for, what it's good at. How is New Breed distinct from other networks? What would be some distinctives of New Breed?
Well, I would say first, as I sort of previously said, we're interdenominational. So if you adhere to the Apostles' Creed, we're going to work with you and we'll even train you. We'll work with other networks in training. Second, we utilize first century tactics, and I understand that's loaded. A lot of people would say that, but we strategically desire to train strike teams to reach lostness of culture and society, and we do that by applying first century church planning principles, or should I say first century church principles. And third, New Breed, we desire to plant multiplicative churches. That means we don't want to just plant one church. We want to plant churches that plant churches that plant churches. And also a new distinctive we're engaging, it coincides with my doctoral work, which is church planning through discipleship. So by leading planters through apprentice-style disciple-making practicums. So we have to remember Christ called us to go and make disciples, and those disciples then gather together to make churches. So as far as I know, there's not another church planning organization that strategically has a disciple-making model. They have church planning models, but they don't really focus upon reproducible disciple-making.
And that's such a key to multiplication. I mean, that is kind of the deal. So many of us in New Breed, me, when I founded it, I was the accidental church planner. I remember starting a church with 50 lost people and a couple Christians that came along. And you talk about discipling people, that discipling people before they were Christians, discipling them into Christians was really kind of the deal. But what are some characteristics of the planners that you were currently working with? What would be a characteristic New Breed church planner?
Wow, we have so many really, really awesome guys, and they're all hard at work. But since New Breed helps church planners reach subcultures and to engage in individually, or I would say in the uniqueness and individuality of each planner's community, nearly all of our plants have a distinct uniqueness. So two of our regional coordinators that we've set up since I've been here, they're New Breeders, and they've been New Breeders for a long time. So Paul Percy, he's one, and David Thompson. So Paul's in Stanton, California. He is our Southwest regional coordinator, and he's just an incredibly gifted guy that is reaching hard to reach areas of lostness. But he's also had some really, really great breakthroughs. And he's definitely one of those apostolic guys, and he'll just continue to press through until he gets the breakthrough. And as well, David Thompson, he's in Bend, Oregon. He's our Northwest regional coordinator, where it's a little bit more rural, so it's different than Stanton is. But there's, these guys they're both apostolically gifted, naturally innovative, creative, and I would say first and foremost in their love for Christ and the way they're led by the Holy Spirit is almost unmatched. They just excel at seeking out God's heart. So we expect that from new breeders. We expect from new breeders not only that they have a solid foundation, but that they're listening and gifted by the Holy Spirit.
That's so rad, man. I love that. And I love the fact that Dave, being an ex-con, that guy has seen so many radical conversions up there. And Paul, man, they have their Bible study in the Sick Dog Tattoo Shop. Like, how cool is that? New Breed prayed for years for a church planter to go to Stanton. If you guys don't know Stanton is the place that you drive through, right? You don't stop there. Prostitutes on the street at 8 a.m. in the morning. And man, it is just, strip motels. I mean, we could tell stories about Stanton. We should do a whole episode with Paul. But here's the deal. When you get church planners coming through, I know for you, Matt, you're pretty, and I know I was this way as well. You're pretty, you don't just take anybody. So it's kind of like, I wouldn't say that you're like the Gong Show or anything, but I've heard you many, many times tell people, hey, I don't know if we're the best network for you. So it's not like you're out to get as many guys into this thing to make it legit, to make it big, to make it, quote unquote successful. You really keep the DNA. Tell me a little bit about the assessment process that you've, because that's morphed and changed over the years. Tell me about the New Breed assessment process. If somebody listening goes, hey, I want to join this, how do I know if I'm the right fit for this? What's the assessment look like?
Yeah, I think our assessment model is one of the. Well, I would have to, toot our own horn and say I think it's one of the best, only because we don't just kick guys out who believe they have a calling. We really want to make sure it's a perfect fit, but we want to bring out, as Paul said to Timothy, cultivating those gifts. So New Breed uses a 3-part assessment. So instead of one initial assessment to decide if someone can be a planter, we realize that sometimes you have to cultivate those gifts, as in the Timothy and Paul aspect of it. So we want to help cultivate that. And so we have a beginning, a middle, and an end stage of assessment. The beginning stage, we focus on the calling and the character of the planter. And I think a lot of plant assessments do that. But, we ask the question, can we train you? And so once we agree to that, we start working with the planner immediately, and we get them hooked up with a coordinator. And the middle part, as they're planting, the middle emphasizes on this competency of the planter, missional engagement, community understanding, those sort of things. So we want to ask a question like, can we walk with you? And do you want that? And how is that looking for us? So we'll have this broader assessment in the middle. And then there's also, as we continue to train and we're continue to walk with you, the end, right prior to the launch or the actual releasing of the planter, we ask the question, can we release you out into, the world for the kingdom work? That's basically, so that's kind of it in a nutshell. I know that was sort of broad, but that's typically.
Rad.
Yeah.
It's like Paul did, right?
That's right.
So how do you train then?
So, well, you for years, you've come up with a ton of material. So, even previous to your going with NAM, you've written so many things that we have a lot of material. But we also, there's other things that I've developed or other things that we've developed over the years just by seeing the observational planner. So we have applicational, experiential, and even theological training material, well, a lot of it. So most of the exclusive stuff like your tome and, on church planning, like Jump School, we make that available for free. So in fact, every time, you write a book or training material, we gift that. That's the planters get that. And so it's sort of a good segue on how we coach and how we train, because, that's the content we use goes into Pathright that we have planners going through. Matter of fact, this morning, one of our planters actually put the questions that we have on Pathright, and he said, "Hey, I need some help with some of these questions." And he put it and he posted the picture up, and some of the people were responding to it. I dig that. I love to see these guys getting into it, right?
That's
and
so rad.
Yeah, and so they have their friends asking questions, and we get into that. So Pathright brings them through almost like an online training, but we're definitely not just online. I mean, we have Zoom calls that guys are in that go over the cutting edge material, and then, as I said, you're never alone because we have a coordinator who works with you through the whole process. Yeah, and so I would also say we coaching and training go hand in hand. So we coach through our Voxer calls, which those are pretty rad. Like we have some great conversations on there, and we have some awesome breakthroughs. I mean, we could give, for instance, like this week we had some great breakthroughs on one of our church planners who had just joined. But I think through Voxer, through Pathright, through our Zoom calls, and the coaching of our regional coordinators, they all go hand in hand.
That's rad. What about funding? Because so it's funny because over the years, nobody did all these things well, right? You would have your one network that did training. You would have another one that does coaching. You'd have another one that did really good assessment. But people were like, well, I don't know what to do. I mean, they're giving me money even. Some were just funding. Like, I remember in the early days of New Breed hitting America, we got people from other networks going, "Hey, they're throwing money at me, but I don't know what to do." So, what about funding? How does New Breed throw money at people?
No, definitely not. And that's one of the first things that I explained to you. So when you said before that I tell people like this may not be a good fit, the first question I always answer for people, even if they don't ask it, it'll be a diatribe question. I'll say, no, we are not a funding network. We've found that, it is that most planters already have funding from other places, but they would come to us and they'd be like, "Hey, nobody's training me." So in reality, we get people from other networks who want to be trained. And so most of those big launch models, they just don't work for the average church planter. Plus it's more of this colonization type planting by taking many other Christians along with you, and we get guys who don't really have that or don't have even their core group sometimes. So, however, we do sometimes function as a mission board, allowing people to funnel their giving through us. So we do operate under a 501c3. So as that's how we started with New Breed Church, and they can give to us if they'd like.
That's rad. So what about a fee? Is there any kind of fee? Because for years, New Breed was free. And I can remember when I came back and I started YouTube back in 2011. And I think back now, like, man, if I had just continued in that space, but my vanity, I'm like, oh, I'm so stupid on video. I hate myself on video. Hate myself on audio too, surprisingly, but I didn't let my vanity win, and I took all my videos down. But I remember in the very beginning when I got here, gosh, in 2011 or like January 2011, posted my first video, and it was like nuts, man. People were just coming through because nobody was occupying that space, and people were like, free network, like, and I started getting all kinds of weirdos, like people living in mom's basement, and like one guy, this is bad. If you're listening, I'm not picking on you if you're out there, but one guy was like, "Hey man, I'm going to come out." Cause I said, "Look, cause back then you had to come and train with us, like wherever we were. It was all hands on, and we changed that up a bit. But this one guy, he was going to come, and he's like, yeah, no, my wife's got a really good job. And we're like, well, hold on. Wait, you're going to leave your wife for 6 months to come be with us? Yeah, I think we need to have a serious talk. The age of red flags going up. And that's how it was, but it was free and everybody came running. And, what about today? Like, where's New Breed at with that? Are we free?
So no, there is a fee, but let me explain it because it's pretty astronomical, actually, man. It's awesome. So it's only $39 a month for the first year that you plant. That's awesome. I mean, if you just think of that, most networks, they make you pay 10% of what you get goes back to the network or to the denomination. So since we're primarily donor based, so for the, we still have to make our training materials. We're still paying for Pathright. We're still paying for all these things. So for the first year, the planters, to offset the cost, we're primarily donor based. So you'll get all the assessment, all the training, all the coaching, and that's just $39 a month. That's ridiculous. That's total steal. So in other words, something you'd normally pay like $2,500 a month for, or if you were given 24/7 access, like we do with our coaching and our other stuff like that, and of that caliber and that dynamic. I mean, just the coaching alone, those calls and those things are going to cost $300. So the assessments cost like $1,200. Plus you're going to spend for your hotel and all your airfare. So New Breed definitely can't be beat for what you get. And you're actually, funding church planners to get trained when you pay it. So if you're paying in to the $39, man, you're paying for your brothers to get the training that they need as well.
That's so rad, man. And I remember when it shifted that way, and it is pretty cool. And, we still have planners that say, hey, can't do that, blah, blah, blah. But I do know that New Breed allows even people on their core team to come in. Like, so if a guy came in, and a lot of networks focus just on the planter himself. But what if somebody's core team wanted to join? Like, if they were like, hey, I got more people on my core team that need this training, need this brotherhood and sisterhood. What about that?
So it's only an additional $10, which once again, we're not asking for an additional $39. We're just asking for an additional $10 for each of that core team to utilize the Pathright and the Zoom calls and stuff like that. So, I mean, that's still a steal. Like we have quite a few of our guys that do that, and they're like, really? You got to be kidding. Like, so if I come on with just me and three other guys, I'm only going to spend like $59, $69 a month for my core team. We're like, yeah. And they're just blown away by it.
What about, okay, so you said guys, what about women? Can women join New Breed?
So one of our distinctives with New Breed, which is a little bit different than some of the others, is that we will train women in New Breed. And the reason we believe biblically, like there's Priscilla and Aquila. I mean, Paul talks about, he always mentions Prisca first before he says Aquila. So if we're actually going to do an assessment, like I don't know any of the church planning networks out there that do not assess husband and wife. So what's the deal with that? Like, you're going to assess the husband and the wife because that church planning is hard. Well, why aren't we training her then? Why aren't we, she's got gifts. Like, why aren't we training her for church planning? It's silly. So yeah, why wouldn't we?
No, that's really good, man. That's really good. Well, hey, any final thoughts or anything that we didn't touch on that's kind of burning on your heart, or anything that any final words as we're approaching our limit on time?
No, other than, you and I, we have fun and we joke around. Even with our New Breed guys, you'll find there's a huge camaraderie and joking. But I'll tell you what, out of the seriousness, we have guys that pray for one another, who love one another, who care for one another. And that aspect of the gospel and the one anotherness, we take seriously. I mean, it is a true church planning brotherhood network, that we're a part of.
That's rad, man.
Amen.
Well, we're going to have another question that we always throw out. But before we do that, we want to ask, where can people go to find out more information about New Breed Network?
They should go to newbreednetwork.org, and they're going to find all that. We have our Instagram account. We have Facebook for New Breed Church Planning they can get onto. There's questions even that they can jump onto. That's an open site there. There's, our Twitter account. I think that one's New Breed CP at New Breed CP. They can always email me, matt@newbreednetwork.org, and I'm always willing to answer questions or whatever someone needs. So, yeah, we're fully accessible all the time through any social media outlet.
One of the things I didn't mention about you, Matt, is on top of being incredibly handsome, you're also a bodybuilder, which is going to help set up this next question. But more importantly, you're a pastor. Like I didn't mention that you're the pastor at Oak Hall in Richmond, and you've done a lot of work networking with different churches, different networks, different denominations. And that's one of the cool things about you is your pastor's heart for planters. And that really, even though you're more apostolic and, in your makeup, you have that shepherd's heart. And that's been really cool. But hey, let's shift gears and let's get you fighting, because you know what's coming, right? And because you lift, right? Like I always think that Craig Rochelle, he must own the gym, right? So if you and Craig Rochelle were to get in a physical fist fight, who would win?
Wow. So here's the thing about weights. You can beat weights up all day long, but it's a little bit different with people. So, not that I don't know him enough to know his tactics, but what I know about myself is that, I've been hit enough and I've been a brawler in my dark years that I'm not afraid to get smacked in the noggin. I'm okay with that. And, I can turn the other cheek because I pretty much know that I can put a hurting on somebody. So, I would say he can take both shots, man. I'm good at it. I don't think he'll knock me down though.
No, I don't think so either. I think he can unload a couple haymakers on you in your head. Yeah. And, since I got the buzzsaw, we're going to rename you. You were now christened as Matt Buzzsaw Fretwell. That's your, let the hurt begin, let it rip. So anyways, brother, hey, always good to have you on. And I knew that you were a bruiser and a brawler. So, I wasn't worried about you in that one. My money was on Matt Fretwell. This has been Hardcore Church Planning. You've been with me and my guest, Matt Fretwell, director of New Breed Church Planning. And Arnold, sign us out.
Remember, if you are called to church planting, go hardcore or go home.
You've been listening to Hardcore Church Planning. Hardcore Church Planning has been brought to you by the Church Planter Podcast and the Church Planter Magazine, which is available in the App Store for both Apple and Android devices. If you like this episode, leave us a positive review. If you didn't like this episode, we'll be happy to give you your money back.